Hello everyone, thank you for clicking. After a weekend off last week, we're back with a run through of the men's race in Challenge Mallorca. Interestingly, there was both a middle distance challenge race on one side of Mallorca this weekend and a full distance Ironman race on the other side. The start list didn't have a standout superstar, but it was an extremely deep field with over 40 pro men. Magnus Ditlev would start as favourite, coming off of a confusing but strong win last week in Challenge Budvar, where he was winning comfortably before being sent the wrong way. He made up the extra distance and still won, but he was then DQ'd before being reinstated as the winner later on. There was also Colin Chartier, who featured in the Collins Cup and won in Challenge Salou a couple of weeks back that was transformed to a duathlon due to the weather, as well as Freddie Funk, who had a couple of wins in challenge races this year, but hasn't had the odds in his favour in his last couple of races, where he had that unfortunate seat post issue in the 70.3 Worlds race, and then didn't get on too well with that duathlon format in Salou. On top of these three, you had Niels Fromhold, Patrick Nilsson, Maurice Clavel, Manuel Messias and Rudy Wild, a few of the better known names who would also be on the hunt for the top places. I'm not going to lie, I'd sunk far too much of my weekend into this video before I realised quite how dodgy the live stream for this event was. The video was extremely patchy, and that's being very generous, so the visual aspect of this video is probably going to be of limited use to understanding how the race went. Apart from a couple of minutes of video on the bike, swim and run pictures were all from a static camera at a single point on the course, which made it very difficult to follow how the race was actually going. The swim would be no wetsuit for the pros. There were a few ITU guys in the field who had no doubt looked to capitalise in the water, but with a fairly hilly bike course that was largely uphill for the first 15k and such a deep field featuring Ditlev and Funk, any gaps on the swim would likely be short-lived. Friedelance, whose name you might recognise from ITU, led out of the water in a time of 23:43 alongside four others, the most notable of whom was Colin Chartier. These five had a gap of around a minute over the gigantic main pack of around 25 athletes, which was led out of the water by Freddie Funk and contained the rest of the favourites. It took less than 20 minutes or so of riding before the big boys on the bike had bridged up to the front, and not long after, at the first time check, Ditlev, Funk, Fromhold, Chartier and Payet had ridden themselves to the front of the bike and were slowly starting to pull away from the rest on the inclines. Once away, this group of five maintained their gap on the downhill half of the first bike lap, but did not manage to grow it by too much. As we came through the halfway point on the bike, the leading five had just over 2 minutes on the next pack of 6 chasers, which featured Clavel and Friedelance, with Nilsson, Wild and Messias in the third established pack a further 2 minutes down. With the hierarchy well established on the bike, the second lap would very much be a question of how much the lead five would be able to extend their gap by into T2. Conversely, for the likes of Friedelance, Nilsson and Messias behind, their chances of a top finish would be dependent on how well they could mitigate their losses to the front. As the leaders hit the hills again on the second lap of the bike, the group began to splinter as the gradients naturally allowed the strongest riders to rise to the top. According to reports from the course, Ditlev was the first one to up the ante, but it was Funk and Fromhold, the two Erdinger teammates, if you can call them that, who actually capitalised. These two were able to open up a slight gap in the region of 30 seconds to Chartier and Payet. The timing split suggested it was actually Ditlev who was suffering the most, having dropped to 5th. It seems this was a result of a dropped chain though, rather than him cracking on the bike, as Ditlev was soon able to bridge back up to Chartier and Payet. Although the hills had caused some fracturing in the lead group, the attacks by Funk and Fromhold had dragged the lead five even further clear of those chasers behind. A group of 18 or so, containing Clavel, Friedelance, Nilsson, Wild and Messias, were 5 to 6 minutes down on Funk at the front of the race at the top of the initial hills on lap 2. A gap which you would suspect would now be too large to win from, although a podium may not yet be out of the picture with a solid enough run and a couple of the lead five cracking. Around the 70k mark on the bike, we got a few pictures of Funk and Fromhold 1 minute ahead out front, with Fromhold in the lead and Funk 20 metres back in the white helmet. On this rolling part of the course, I did notice how well Funk was able to consistently stay in his quite aggressive aero position, whilst Fromhold was up and down and in and out of the saddle, which probably suggested that Funk is cruising along fairly comfortably. These two were working well together, alternating on the front on the drag back into T2. By the time Funk and Fromhold arrived into T2, they had a healthy 3 minutes to Chartier and 3 minutes 20 to Ditlev in third and fourth. Gregor Payet, who had ridden much of the bike with the four big names, finally cracked on the final 20 to 30k of the bike and was swallowed up by the main chase pack a further 3 to 4 minutes back, who all appeared to be having a rather cosy time in the transition tent. Based on recent results, Chartier was on the best run form, having ran a 1:12 in Salou a couple of weeks back, whilst Funk struggled with the extra running in the duathlon, clocking a 1:26. Whilst last week in Budvar, Ditlev and Fromhold both ran 1:13s. But with a tough bike course in the legs and Funk and Fromhold 3 minutes up the road, it would still very much be all to play for. Despite recent results though, Funk had a very strong first 10k, opening up 1:30 to Fromhold. Chartier had a strong start to the run too, but had only managed to take 20 seconds off of Funk out front, whilst Ditlev had actually lost a further 10 seconds to Funk. The same pattern continued for the next 5k, Funk holding strong out front, with Fromhold going backwards and being overtaken by a fast chasing Chartier first and then shortly after by Ditlev too. Out onto the final lap on the run, and for the first time all race, Funk was starting to look a little bit vulnerable. Chartier was still pushing on strong, looking for the win, but with only 5k left to close a 2.5 minute gap, it was going to have to be some final 5k from Chartier. With no on-course cameras and reports that Chartier and Ditlev were 30 and 45 seconds back on Funk, we were watching this static camera at the finish to see if it would be the blue tri-suit of Funk or the black of Chartier to pop up first. But it was Funk who emerged into shot first to take what would be a very well-deserved win after a couple of tough races where the luck was not always in his favour. Chartier would continue his impressive run of results with second and Ditlev 2 in third. Fromhold would finish in fourth, not quite able to stick the run after a strong bike. Behind, Yuri Klulen would have the fastest run of the day to finish in fifth. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, even if the pictures were a bit dodgy. I'll see you next weekend for the unofficial 2021 Kona replacement in Ironman California, where we'll see Jan Frodeno versus Lionel Sanders versus Gustav Iden.